Okay, in this video, I'm going to show you how to create a list in Java. And specifically, we're going to create something called an array list. So I'm just going to create one right now and explain how it works. So the first thing you've probably noticed is it's giving us an error. It says it doesn't know what an array list is. So if we just import it, we're good. The first thing I did was I said, I'm creating an array list. The next thing I did is I put the word string in angle brackets, and that means I'm creating a list that contains strings. If I wanted to, I could create a list that contains integers or a list that contains doubles. For this program, we're just creating a list of strings. And I named it Pokemon. So you can probably guess what's going to go inside of this list. So let's add some Pokemon to that list. Very easy. I just say Pokemon because that's the name of the list I just created. And then I can say add. And I can put in Charmander in quotes. And that's how easy it is to add something to a list. Well, you might say, how do I know that it actually contains the string Charmander? And we'll get to that. I'll show you how to display all of the items in a list in a second. But for now, let's add a couple more Pokemon. Okay, so now we've added 3 Pokemon to this list. And if you notice, this Pokemon is underlined in yellow, which is a warning. It's telling us this list was only added to. It's never read, which means in our programming, we've put things inside of this list, but we're never using them. So why don't we do that? Let's use them. So I'm just going to display all the contents of this list one by one. Let's say Pokemon.get 0, which means the 0th item in the list. If we were numbering all of the items in our list, we would start with 0 as the first index, and then the second thing would be at index 1, and then the one after that would be at index 2, and the one after that would be at index 3. So let's just call them by their index. So the second one would be index 1, and then index 2. So let's run this. And it gives us all the items in our list, just like we asked. Now, a better way to do this would be to make a loop. Because what if we had 100 things in this list? That'd be kind of tedious to type out every single one and call it by index, right? So if you create a for loop, let me show you how to do it that way. Let's just create a for loop where we say for integer I equaling 0, and while I is less than Pokemon.size, which is a wonderful function you can call on array lists, let's increase I by 1 every time. Now we've got I starting at 0 and going through every single value for the indexes in this list. So let's display everything at position I. And let's run this again. And as you can see, it still works. We've got Charmander, Bulbasaur, and Squirtle. Even though we didn't have to call everything by its specific index, we used an iterating variable I in a for loop. Magic. Now you might be wondering, how can I put something in the list based on what the user wants? Well, it's pretty easy. Let's create our scanner. We can get input, import it. Now let's ask the user what they want to add to this list. And then we just say Pokemon, which is the name of our list, .add, and then that variable we used to store their input. So Pokemon.add input Pokemon. And let's also display a message before we print out the contents of the list, just so they know what we're doing. So it says, what Pokemon do you want to add? Let's say Pikachu, just because everyone's heard of that. So we have Charmander, Bulbasaur, and Squirtle, which were added directly in the code. And then we have Pikachu, which was added from the input. And those are the Pokemon in our list of Pokemon. Okay, so now let's learn how to remove something from our list. It's pretty easy. There are a couple different ways we can do it. Let's get rid of the input one and just use the ones that we add directly in the code. So there's just Charmander, Bulbasaur, and Squirtle in the list. Let's say Pokemon.remove Charmander. And let's see what happens now when we run the program. It says, here are your Pokemon, Bulbasaur, Squirtle. So as you can see, it doesn't include Charmander anymore. And that's because we called remove, passing in the value Charmander. Another way you can remove an item from a list, so let's not remove Charmander anymore. This time let's remove Bulbasaur, but let's remove it by its index. So remember, the first element in a list is at index 0, so that would be Charmander. Bulbasaur is at index 1, so let's just remove at index 1. We can pass in an integer and it'll remove the element at that index. So let's run it again. And as you can see, it doesn't include Bulbasaur anymore. Okay? And the last thing I want to show you how to do is how to remove all of the items in the list. So let's change that. And it's very simple. We can just say Pokemon, which is the name of our list, of course, .clear. So now when we run it, it says, here are your Pokemon, and it doesn't have any because we removed all of them. So of course, your assignment is to program a shopping list where the user can add items, remove items, view all of the items in the list, and then remove all of the items in the list. However, that will only get you 95%. If you want 100%, one more thing you have to do is allow the user to move something from one position to another position on the list. So see if you can work through that and figure it out. I'm happy to answer questions, of course, if you've worked on something and struggled through it for a little while. But that's the assignment, so good luck.